From Donald Trump to Hillary Clinton to Governor Nikki Haley to the latest must-see races here in South Carolina, College of Charleston political science professor Gibbs Knotts talks to me one-on-one for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. Well, Gibbs, it's so good to see you again.
Absolutely, glad to be with you.
I appreciate this. Well, let's talk about developing news. Donald Trump and his latest protesters, which have actually turned violent in Kansas City and Chicago. On Thursday, a couple of protesters were actually water sprayed by a couple of law enforcement officials there, and on Friday it turned really violent to the point where he had to actually cancel it. And I'm wondering, as we sit here right now, what goes to your mind when you see those protesters?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously we have the First Amendment right to have political dialogue, and so, you know, people are within their rights. Trump is certainly within his right to hold a rally and say what he wants to say, and then also, you know, people have a right to stand up and object. You know, I think it's very indicative of the tenor of American politics today, where you've got people that are so far to the right and so far to the left, and we see it in Washington and we see it in our communities, and folks aren't willing to compromise and try hard to see somebody else's perspective. And so I don't really think we get where we need to be in society if we're just yelling at each other. I think we do need to sit down and talk a little bit. And so, you know, while it's certainly someone's right to protest, and it's certainly someone's right to have a position, you know, I don't like it as somebody who cares about our country and cares about political dialogue. I like to see folks sitting down and talking through issues a little bit more. And so, you know, it's disappointing. You know, it's certainly, you know, I think back to the 1960s is what it reminds me of, you know, some of those really intense political campaigns. I've studied George Wallace a decent amount, and he of course ran for president as an independent and then later as a Democrat. And when he would go and campaign, and he would go up to Harvard and he'd go campaign in some places that weren't very friendly to what he was saying, and he would get heckled, and he would call back and he would say, you know, you long-haired hippie, sit down, blah blah blah. And so Trump's not using the exact same language, but it reminded me of an earlier time in politics with a person who definitely had very strong supporters, but also people who were very against what Wallace was standing for.
And so, as you know, Trump went on the Sunday talk shows yesterday, basically, you know, walking back most of that, you know, protesters, basically saying he's not responsible for it.
Right.
And so, when you think of that, what does that tell you, Gibbs?
You know, I think he does have to bear some responsibility. I mean, if you're talking of saying things like, you know, and Marco Rubio has made this point. I think he's done a nice job of it. But saying things like, you know, back in the old days, these people used to get beat up, or, you know, he does the big thing. He made it big on The Apprentice, right, where he said you're fired, and now he just says you're out of here, or things like that. And so I think he does have to bear some responsibility. Obviously, you can't control anything that's going to happen. And Trump's right. I mean, there's protesters at many of the events. We're lucky in South Carolina. We got to go to so many of these campaigns, and people will stand up sometimes and get into it with the particular person. But, you know, I think Trump has a larger percentage, a larger portion of his events are interrupted. I mean, I think he is definitely, he's tapped into a lot of fear, a lot of anger, and made some comments that have alienated a lot of people. And so it's been, you know, I don't, you know, it's made for some good television, but it certainly, I don't think, makes for good politics.
And speaking of which, as you know, he actually went after Governor Nikki Haley on Twitter.
Right, exactly. They've had battles back and forth, and you know, I think Haley, you know, who again, that's what's interesting about Haley. Haley in 2010 was she was a Tea Party backed in some ways, insurgent candidate. Certainly not part of the establishment, but you know, Haley has talked publicly about how she's you know, disappointed in the rhetoric that Trump's using and feels like it's not good for the Republican Party, and it's going to be difficult for the Republican Party to expand its base beyond a core smaller group of voters if they don't, you know, reach out to minorities, reach out to women, reach out to immigrants, different groups that I think are important for the Republican to expand its base as a party, and obviously what's happening at these Trump rallies is not going to do that.
And let's move from national politics to local politics. As you know, we had two political bombshells last week. Colleen Condon, the current Charleston County Councilwoman, basically said, hey, I'm not going to run for re-election. And of course, as you know, State Representative Mary Tinkler will not seek her 114 seat. She's going to instead run for treasurer. When you think of that, what does that tell you?
Well, I think people eventually they're not going to be politics forever. I mean I think that certain times people shift. On the Tinkler situation, she's in a difficult district for her. She, because of some unique circumstances of Harold having to vacate his seat, there not being a challenger. It's a Republican seat. Right. It's drawn up to be a Republican seat. It doesn't mean that Mary couldn't have won, but it would certainly been difficult. She would have had the power of incumbency, right, but she was going to have some challengers, and so I think she being able to be here in Charleston, not have to commute back and forth to Columbia, and have a little bit more favorable demographics that you'll have countywide in Charleston as opposed to the particular seat she was in. I mean, on the council seat, I mean, Quintin's been a big important voice on council for a long time, raising some really important issues for the city. So those are going to certainly be some important shoes to fill. But I'm looking forward to see who runs, and it's a new day with a new mayor and new issues, but still a whole list of issues that the city's facing, from the homelessness issue to all these redevelopment projects to continuing to deal with infrastructure and transportation. I mean, there's a lot that the city council has to deal with in the next certainly in the next session.
And let me go back to Charleston City Council, because, as you know, it's maybe I guess 2 months now that John Zuckerberg's been on the job. And already he's gotten a lot of pushback from the community and the city council members.
Yeah. I mean, I think I have a colleague, Kendra Stewart, who's made this point. Riley was really good at he had built up a lot of capital with council, done a lot of favors, worked hard, and so he was able to get council to do some of the things he wanted to do probably a little easier than Tecklenburg is. Tecklenburg could probably get to that point, but it takes a long time. And it's just like Barack Obama couldn't go into the presidency and just decide to do all the things he wanted to do. He's got to work with Congress, just like a mayor. Even though we have a strong mayor in Charleston, they have hiring and firing authority. They can get a lot done, but the legislature controls, obviously makes legislation, or the council makes the laws, and they also control the purse strings. And so you can't do much if you don't have the funding to make it happen. And so I think Tecklenburg will get better at that, and I think that he's just going to have to it takes a lot of work behind the scenes and a lot of keeping people in the loop and trying to build coalitions around projects. Maybe not tackle too much, but I expect good things, and we live in a great city, so all the things we're dealing with are certainly manageable.
Sure.
But yeah, there's definitely some challenges. There's no question about it.
And speaking of challenges, let's talk about Wednesday. A lot of people will be filing for seats in the South Carolina State House, mainly the House of Representatives and State Senate. What do you look for with that as well?
Well, I wish more people would run. I mean, I think it's difficult because there's a lot of demands on a state representative or a state senator's time. You're going to Columbia a good bit. You make $10,000 to $15,000 a year. You have to take time away from your business and your family. It's particularly hard for people with young children, people that have a certain type of job where they don't have the flexibility to get off. So it can be difficult. But with that said, it's such an important position. I mean, we see that every day, from fixing our roads to making sure we fund our school systems in a fair way, to many of the laws that govern our lives. And so the state legislature has tremendous power in South Carolina and can do a lot of things. And so and we don't have a lot of people that get challenged. A lot of times it's very rare for an incumbent to face a primary challenge, and many incumbents don't even face general election challenges. So people, once they get in, they tend to stay in. And so I certainly hope that a lot of people will run. It's definitely a commitment. You've got to raise money. You've got to knock on a lot of doors. You've got to build a good team. But it's definitely an important thing, and I hope that people will think about doing it. And it's a great way to make a difference.
Quickly, describe to me the following one word: Hillary Clinton's victory in South Carolina.
Game changer.
Thomas Dixon running for Tim Scott's Senate seat.
Minor.
I-526.
Expensive.
Well, College of Charleston political science professor Gibbs Knotts, thank you so much for your time.
It's always a pleasure. Thanks for reaching out.
I appreciate this.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.